Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of In Other News. Sorry for the long vacay away from doing any podcasting, but let's start the year 2013 right. Happy New Year, everybody, by perhaps doing a whole slew of updates on world leaders. We've had a big turnover of presidents and prime ministers around planet Earth in the last few months, and a whole bunch more coming this year. So I wanted to stay ahead of the game, get back into the swing of things here on the podcasting for the super fans out there that have been asking for it. And let's start today with Japan's prime minister. I know I should have done this maybe a month or two ago, but he just took office, so I'm not too far behind. The man I'm talking about's name is Shinzo Abe. I just like to call him Abe, because it looks like Abe Lincoln. Shinzo Abe is the new Prime Minister of Japan. And he's not new to this job. He was Prime Minister of Japan back in 2006, and he sucked so bad at it, he quit after less than a year. It was actually Shinzo Abe, short term, that started a whole snowball rolling down the hill that all of the prime ministers that came after him for 5 years, none of them lasted more than a year. So Japanese politics has been gridlocked for some time. Their economy has been gridlocked for some time. They've been kind of stagnant, even though they're the third richest country on planet Earth. They really haven't grown any for 2 or 3 decades. So it's always kind of a top concern for Japanese politicians. But of particular note, Shinzo Abe is interesting because of his kind of hawkish stances foreign policy-wise for a lot of things he's done in the past and perhaps might do in the future. So let's look at Abe here in a little bit more detail, very briefly, of what we can expect in the years to come and why I think this is an important individual to pay attention to. First off, he is the head of the LDP, the Liberal Democratic Party, which of course means nothing to most Americans. They're kind of the equivalent of Republicans in America. They have been the standard-bearer political party in Japan for 100 years, especially since World War II. They have been in charge of the Diet, the Congress, for most of that time. Most prime ministers for the last 70 years have been from this political party. However, because Japan has been stagnating and sucking for the last 20 or 30 years, this party had been increasingly falling out of power, out of popularity, and indeed the rival party, the DJP, which is the equivalent of the Democrats in the United States, they actually won for the first time, I think, ever, took over the prime ministership a few years ago. Now, the tide has turned back, and the Japanese populace just put LDP back in charge. Now, again, it's a prime ministership, so they don't directly elect the prime minister, but they put enough people in the Diet, that is the Congress, in LDP party that overwhelmingly the LDP voted, or the Diet voted him in because the LDP is in charge of the Diet. And he just took office December 26th, day after Christmas. So, first off, it's a return to power, not just of Abe himself, but of the kind of center-right political party in Japan. Again, much like the Republicans. Did the Japanese people put him back in the power because they just loved him so much? No. Did the Japanese people put him back in power because they love the LDP so much? No. It actually was, by all sources who reported this story about the Japanese election, it pretty much was the complete lesser of all evils. Everybody has said, yes, the DJP has been in charge for several years and they sucked and the economy's gone nowhere. And the DJP has been fractured by internal fighting. And I think there was actually 4 or 5 different candidates who were going up for the prime ministership. So it was just kind of a discombobulated mess to begin with. And the LDP came out on top as the lesser of all evils. So, no great big passion for this party in Japan right now, but it was give the old guys a chance again, we'll see what they can do. So that's how he's gotten back into power. Again, by the way, he was in power in 2006, sucked, total gridlock. I think he only lasted 8 months. So this is not a guy with a really strong track record in the prime ministership, but here's why he's important. Because he's going to try to turn around Japan. He might have attempted this back in 2006, but it didn't work. But here in 2013, he's saying, boom, I'm going to do all these big economic things. And he has an overwhelming, I think it's almost like a super majority in the lower house of the Diet. in order to get these things done. So it is apparently, he can do a lot of these things. What I mean by supermajority in the lower house of the Diet is they have so many LDP people there, they can now pass legislation and override the upper house of the Diet. To my understanding, any of my Japanese political friends out there, if I've got it wrong, hit me up and let me know. But that's my understanding. So we're looking at a guy back in power from a political party with a long-standing tradition that wants to get a lot done and is in a particular position that he might be able to. So that's interesting thing number one. Interesting thing number two is he's going to focus most of his energy, he said so far, on the economy. The Japanese economy has been stagnant for decades. They're rich, but it's stagnant. Very low growth rates. Half the growth rates of the United States right now, and hell, we're in a recession. So what he is suggesting right out of the box here, he's only been in office for a week and 2 weeks now, he's saying, stimulus, baby. We're going to start spending money. We're going to put forward government money to infuse action into the economy. Maybe building projects, maybe infrastructure projects. We're going to encourage foreign investment. We're actually going to push the Japanese bank to lower interest rates. Even if it causes inflation, we don't care. We want people juiced up. We want stuff happening in the economy. It's bold. It's a bold proposition. No one's really pushed it quite this hard in the past that I can remember. So interesting to watch how this is going to play out. Again, it's also interesting to me that he's from the kind of center-right conservative party. Again, kind of like Republicans in the United States. But even though he's from that inclination, which in America you'd say would be like anti-big government, anti-spending, anti-all that. But Japan's been stagnant enough. They're saying infuse it, let's do it, let's move it. So economically, Shinzo Abe trying to juice it up, baby. Get it hot. Get the fire hot under the Japanese economy. Which, again, by the way, everybody's been trying to do for decades. We'll see if he succeeds in that. He does have the supermajority to perhaps make it happen. Now, the other thing that Shinzo Abe is famous for, and most of the world press has been focusing on since he was running for office and now back in office as the head Japanese honcho, is that he has a very hawkish foreign policy. When he was running for office for the last 3 months during the whole Senkaku Island debacle between China and Japan, Abe was very forward saying, we should be tougher. Screw the Japanese, or screw the Chinese. And I'm paraphrasing, of course. But he was like, if I was in office, I would do this. So if I was in office, I would stand up to the Chinese. The Senkakus are our islands. Very, very, very kind of extreme nationalist push. Since he's gotten into office, I think he has softened that quite a bit. It is also important to note that before he was in the prime ministership for the first time, he visited the Yasukuni Shrine. That is that war shrine in Tokyo that has war dead in it, including a bunch of war criminals, that when any time a Japanese official visits them, it really pisses off South Korea and China. So he has visited that in the past and pissed off China and South Korea. It remains to be seen if he's going to visit it while he's in this kind of pro-nationalist mood now as the prime minister. Will he do it? You should pay attention to that. If Abe goes out on a limb and visits the Yasukuni Shrine, that is a clear indication that he's being very hawkish, going to put it in your face. I don't care. Pro-Japan, rah-rah team. I don't care if it pisses off China and South Korea. Personally, I don't think he'll do that because I think economics is going to trump his pro-nationalist spirit now that he's in office. It's a great way to get votes. All right, when you're running for office, dare say he won't visit the Yasukuni Shrine because he's going to want to continue to improve economic ties with South Korea and China. There's so much business. They export so much stuff to those countries. They don't really want to piss him off. But who knows? We'll see what Abe does now that he's in office. He might go for it. So that's something to watch. Again, he was very kind of, hey, this Senkaku issue is hurting Japanese pride. And there are islands, and we should stand up to China. That's what he was saying before he was in office. We'll see what happens as events unfold with these territorial issues, not just with China, not just with South Korea, but even with Russia, in little island groupings around Japan. So we'll watch that this year as well. Finally, Abe went out on a limb, and he's very open about this. He was very open about this when he was in office in 2006. He is very pro-U.S. Woo! Booyah, Uncle Sam! Shinzo Abe is all about reestablishing strong ties with the United States, economically, militarily, and anything else. when he was in office, or actually for years, but when he was in the prime ministership 6 years ago, he was the one calling for a reevaluation of the Japanese constitution to perhaps change that little clause that says their military can't be more aggressive. For those of you that know, take my class and know that Japan doesn't have a actual military, they have a defense force. Shinzo Abe is one of the people with that pro-nationalist spirit that has said, maybe we should change that. Maybe we should not limit ourselves militarily, given that we have South Korea over there, and our North Korea, crazy North Korea, given the rise of China, given that we're having these territorial disputes with China over the Senkaku Islands. Maybe we should change our constitution. Look for that to be brought back up this year, too, by Shinzo Abe and crew. And he is, of course, really wants to re-strengthen ties that had been weakened over the last few years of DJP rule, because the DJP was like, we want to be more independent. We want to kind of go our own way. We don't want to offend our Chinese and South Korean friends. And so maybe we'll distance ourselves from the U.S. a little bit. Abe's reversing it, going, let's embrace, because we are going to need the U.S. And maybe we should strengthen ourselves militarily. And not only militarily and foreign policy-wise, but economically, Shinzo Abe has already suggested that maybe he wants to sign in more for the TPP, that Trans-Pacific Partnership, that huge economic Pacific partnership that the United States is pushing. So, in summary, just in 10 minutes, Shinzo Abe, back in charge of Japan as the Prime Minister, going to focus mostly on economics big time. He is kind of a hawkish foreign policy guy, but that'll probably get reeled in for the sake of economics. And a very pro-U.S. guy. Look for U.S.-Japanese relations to get tighter than ever before, as the U.S. wants that, by the way. The U.S. wants to promote that. We're trying to promote ties with Australia and Indonesia and India and Japan and South Korea. Again, perhaps not to encircle China, but to strengthen the U.S.'s role in the Pacific as a whole, and Japan, under Shinzo Abe, is going to facilitate that. Got it? Good. What world leader would you like to talk about next? Hit me up here, or any comments you have about Japanese politics or economics. Hit me up. Let's do this. Let's get back on the podcasting bandwagon. Happy 2013 to you. Let's make it the most productive and awesome ever. Party on.